Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and if you're interested in the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, you've come to the right place. Today, we're tackling another community request. This time, it's how to handle boss battles in MMRPG. And good news if you're a player, the discussion won't be solely focused on narrator advice. You're going to learn a lot about how to prepare for boss battles as well. We're going to start with a review of the advice that the book provides. Then Billy Mickel and I are going to chat for a little bit with our own ideas. I'm going to include some advice from Tate RF, and we're going to wrap everything up with a nice clean list. I hear that top 10s are all the rage these days. That's a lot to cover, so let's get into the details. Let's start with a review of all the advice that the book gives. The first suggestion is matching up the heroes rank for rank against a similar group of villains. So this is the classic X-Men versus the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants matchup. The book suggests that there would be even 50-50 odds for the heroes in this scenario, but there are things to consider that could swing the odds in either direction. 1. Is your party coming into this battle fresh, or are they low on health and focus from previous encounters? 2. Has the party done some good role-playing and therefore well stocked up on karma points? Or have they used a lot to get through the previous battles? 3. Is there going to be an element of surprise one way or the other? On paper, a rank-for-rank matchup may look even, but a wounded party low on karma that's taken by surprise can easily get slaughtered by a evenly matched foe. The book also suggests that you can mix things up a bit, matching a character up against 2 foes of a lower rank, or 4 foes that are 2 ranks lower. This can work, certainly, but I think it depends on the builds. For example, if you had a rank 3 villain like the Wrecker, who has Sturdy 2 and a ×5 multiplier, against 4 rank 1 shield agents, they're going to get, well, wrecked. It would be almost impossible for them to do any damage to the Wrecker, and the Wrecker has a 50% chance of one-shotting them on any given hit. Now conversely, you could build a party of rank 1 characters that could easily target the Wrecker's weak ego or logic with mental or magical powers and a surprising power trait. With a focus of only 30, it wouldn't be that hard for such a party to bring the Wrecker down to shattered, maybe in just a couple rounds. So I think the main lesson here is you can't just look at the numbers of the ranks and expect balance. The book gives additional advice on climactic battles, suggesting that the big bad use underlings and not step directly into a fight. Underlings are an excellent addition to any boss battle, not because of the damage they can deal out, but because of their ability to keep the big bad from taking damage. Fanatical minions will stick close to their leader in battle and use the interpose reaction to take hits meant for him. The big bad, of course, can use skulk. Or the minions could use help teammate to ensure their boss lands a hit. You could also have a lieutenant of those minions that has inspiration that would give his boss edges every round. If your boss is planning on not stepping into a fight, make sure he's got other things to do rather than sitting passively. The battle plan power, for example, only requires allies to be within earshot, so your big bad could easily be hidden away safely, giving commands from cover, or even a different room via radio or speaker system. Regarding venue, don't select the venue on dramatic impact alone. If a villain has studied the party and knows many of them, for example, have flight or the sniping power, while they themselves are a close quarters combatant, they definitely will not choose a wide open space for a final confrontation. Let's talk through an example using this advice. Let's say we've got a pretty common party of rank 3 heroes. Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Misty Knight, and Miles Morales. The big bad is the Kingpin, and he's rank 3, so that cancels out one of the party members, as we try to assure we've got parity between ranks. Let's trade one more of the rank 3 heroes in for 4 rank 1 minions. We can use the Hydra Agent stat block, but what we're going to do is change the team to Fisk Industries instead of Hydra, because technically this is a requirement for the help teammate reaction. Finally, let's say that the Kingpin knew that the party was coming, because of course he would, and that he's invested in some illicit tech to help defeat them. He's got 1 additional minion in a power suit. We'll use the Armored Hydra Agent profile as an elite bodyguard. Because he's rank 4, we trade in those rank 3 heroes to even things out. So we've got 1 rank 4, 1 rank 3, and 4 rank 1s versus 4 rank 3 heroes. Let's force the party to get close and set this climactic battle in the penthouse level of a Fisk Industries building. When the battle starts, we can have Wilson Fisk monitoring the battle from a nearby safe room, and he can finally enter the fray at a dramatic moment. So the advice in the book does a pretty good job of setting up a climactic final battle, but if you really want to punch up the drama, take a listen to the conversation that Billy and I had on the subject. what are some of the challenges that you had as a narrator running the climactic battle? And then what were some of the things that you did to adapt to make it a little bit more challenging?
Well, so the main thing that I try and do is one, really know my characters and their powers, and we established ahead of time. It's like, look, the characters in the book, villains and whatnot, are designed to be playable. I may not play a villain exactly like it is in the book, especially if he's the boss villain. So, they've got to be able to do some other things sometimes that may not be statted out in the book. Just because if you went 1-for-1 or 4-on-1 or 5-on-1 with some of these villains, they're not going to stand much of a chance. The villains, that is. So you've got to do some things differently, whether it's, and again, a lot of people allude to, oh, you need a bunch of minions, which is fine. A bunch of, like, throw a lot of fodder at them, and all these, Dr. Doom's going to have all these Doom bots. Well,
That's what
not,
I was going to bring up, right? Yeah.
but not every big bad has access to that. So sometimes, like, Magneto might have the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, he might not. But I picture Magneto, if he's fighting, he's able to hold off this attack over here while also attacking over here. You've just got to be able to describe that. And it's almost like you're giving him lightning actions, potentially, even though he doesn't have the power. And I've told my players ahead of time in session 0, I won't, if it's the big bad or the villain, they're going to be able to do sometimes a little bit, some stuff that may not seem like you're like, oh, I can't do 2 actions in a turn or whatever. Sometimes I haven't had to come across that, but setting makes a lot, and landscape, materials. Like, I had a battle where there was a siege at the precinct, a police precinct, right? Sabretooth, Constrictor, 2 homemade characters, a Bruiser and another guy. I can't even remember now at this time. The mission was Sabretooth was to infiltrate and basically kill off some talkers or some loose ends. When the heroes got there, they'd seen Sabretooth make his way in, like, bullets are flying, police are shooting him, but he just rages past them, and like they're hitting him but not stopping him. And then the Bruiser's throwing a car to, like, kind of distract him and stop that. So he gets in the building. The players then have to deal with what's going on outside, the Bruiser outside, Constrictor, who's kind of like, runs interference with, snapping his coils and wrapping around, electrocuting, whatever. And some of them are dealing with that. The others kind of try and circumvent and get into the building, like, hey, how can we stop Sabretooth? He's in the building now. Power's down, lights are out. You're describing when they get in there. Now there's also injuries. You got some of the police are trapped under girders, or the car that blew through the front of this station. The lights are flickering on and off. You can't always see everything. So now Sabretooth has an advantage. He's a rank 4. They're all rank 3s. And there was, I can't remember. Normally there's 5 in the party. I might have had somebody missing. I can't remember. But I'm using this setting itself to the villain's advantage. So when they get in there, one, it's not all of them, because the others are having to deal with, and people allude to this all the time. Some of them are having to deal with, okay, this guy's bleeding out because he's got a car on top of him and he was slashed by Sabretooth. Okay, well, I can't just walk past him and deal with Sabretooth. Somebody's got to help this guy. So then it ends up just being 2 on Sabretooth when it could have been 4. And not only that, it's in the dark. I also had a recorded a lion's roar too. And I'm like, you come around the corner, even the security lights are still flickering in and on. They're not always constantly on. And then I played the lion's roar. And then you hear, and Sabretooth jumps out. And then he starts handling them. And I might have told you about this. They were kind of impressed with, like, I didn't know how vicious he was. And he was putting it into him. Finally, then when the others finally dealt with their issues and got there, they were able to overwhelm him. But it's scenario, setting, obstacles. No one says that you can't, like, I just picture when the Avengers are fighting the Hulk, right? And say Iron Man's shooting at him. He'll rip up the concrete or pavement, and almost make it as a shield. So using that stuff around you, yes, he's got mighty or sturdy, but again, there's what's called, they got plow through. Hulk doesn't have to be the only one. Maybe it's somebody that's got super strength rips off a car door and blocks a certain amount of damage. So they're not taking as much, and they're using um, the landscape around him. It could
Yeah.
be kind
Just taking cover is something that, if you know your environment, you as the enemy know your environment, and especially if you're a character like Magneto that doesn't have to be right up close, then Magneto is going to Magneto would create the environment in
yeah,
such a
he'd
way
start
where
throwing
he
stuff
was
at you.
protected. He was up here. So if you're Captain America on the ground with a metal shield, going up against Magneto flying in the sky, how good are you going to be in that particular situation? Well, your typical big boss would have done the homework because you have defeated all of the minions. So for me,
Yep.
the minions aren't just roadblocks. The minions are a way to sort of role play how the big bad is going to learn, which really allows you as the narrator to metagame a little bit. But that
Yep.
metagaming, it's the only way you can represent a supervillain in the game. That a supervillain, a Doctor Doom, right? Doctor Doom's got a higher logic than I would. So how do you role play that? Well, by looking at everyone's character sheets and saying Doctor Doom would have figured out how to address every one of these issues,
Yep.
right? The same way, there were the Magneto protocols at the end of X-Men 97, or
Yep.
how, various superheroes, Batman, right, different
Yep.
universe, but Batman has a plan to take out every one of his so-called allies should
Yep.
something happen. He just kind of pulls out the plan and you've got a way to bring them down. So yeah, a very intelligent, maybe not Saber, but even Sabretooth has done some planning in
Yep.
like the recent comics. It's an
Well,
evil kind of planning.
yeah. And even though he's vicious, he's not stupid to like he's going to use whatever advantage he can. And going back and alluding to, the main enemy, you can even use Arcade in his murder world. How many superheroes has he had come through his murder world and gone through his traps and either defeated him or whatever? So now he should have some idea of how to handle people, shut certain things down so that it tweaks it to his side and his, you know, traps and whatnot, whoever it may be, like Magneto or whoever. But I think sometimes people, when they get in this game, they picture, okay, it's all 4 or 5 of my heroes right out in the middle of nowhere
Right.
with the villain right in the middle and nothing else that can, you know what I mean? So it's just waylaying on him. But there's so much more to environment, like you said, metagaming and knowing your enemy sort of thing. Yeah. And I think so. I don't know how you feel about this. Like, again, you got a DM screen for a reason. Some people are really big about rolling all the rolls out in front of everybody. Sometimes, if something doesn't work out right or like something would happen too quick, I might, fudge it a little bit and be like, I don't want the villain to like get one
Yeah.
shot. And again, some people might be totally against that. I'm not. I do the same thing for my players too. Sometimes I'm like, I'll tweak it in their favor. But if I do roll the dice and I was like, oh, it's fantastic, I'll lift it up and show them it's fantastic. Especially if I roll it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I got 2 fantastics in a row, and I show them
Yeah.
so that they know I do it. Because some people are all about rolling the dice out in front of, but that's part of it is like some of the suspense of, did the villain hit me? Did he not hit me? What's going to happen? Sometimes like the hit points, again, they allude to it, I think, in Tony's workshop. You can roll it up. Like maybe they're just waylaying on the villain too much. They don't have to know exactly how many hit points. If you're wanting the
Oh
battle to go
yeah.
a little bit more, you're like, hey, I just want to get a little bit more in there. And he's not wasting all them away either. So sometimes it's just, as long as it moves the story along and as long as it helps make the scene and make it thematic, make it last as long as they feel it's necessary, but
Mhm.
they, whatever happens. So,
Yeah, there's some great advice in the Revenge of the Super Skrull adventure. That's the Roll20 exclusive adventure. And in the beginning scene, it's kind of the scene that I used for the actual play I did with my daughter. It's just like a bank robbery, and the heroes are there, and they've got to, you know, fix the situation.
yep.
What they say is if the heroes are having too easy of a time, then you can put a couple of other bad guys in some of those rooms that were off to the right, and that they were just going through some papers there, maybe looking
Yeah.
for the safe password or code, and then they can kind of open the door and then join the battle. So this way, so the reason I like that is I am one of those people that have recently, I'd say even just the last couple of years, really gotten into rolling everything up front. And the
Yeah.
reason I do it is because it forces me, and this is more important in Marvel Multiverse than in other games, is to, you know, cement what the target number is.
Yeah.
Right? If I was playing, so I play Pathfinder quite a bit. If I'm playing Pathfinder and there's a knowledge check I want somebody to make, my instinct is to just sometimes, and this is a bad instinct, is to just wait for them to roll and then be like, that's high enough.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, like, I don't, to me, that's too easy a thing to fall into. So by rolling everything out in the open, I have to, set that target number and I have to immediately know whether it's a pass or fail. So yeah, so I've started to do that quite a bit in Marvel Multiverse. And but then, like you said, the levers are, well, maybe this guy had a 3 resilience and not a 2.
Yeah.
Or maybe this guy isn't a minion, because I love using the minion stats. Maybe he is a full rank 1 character, and therefore his stats could be, arrayed in a different manner. Or, or maybe there's another guy or gal right behind that door that's going to enter because it's this particular battle. Or sometimes it's great for the heroes to get a win like that, especially if they're
Yeah.
rolling really well.
Yeah.
Like, fantastic, I had one battle where it was an ultimate fantastic success, and the whole battle was over so quickly. I'm like, well, I mean, you rolled an ultimate fantastic success. I'm not gonna make things anticlimactic and say, oh,
Yeah.
that was great, you killed the guy, but then another one pops out from behind the corner and let's do the same thing all over again.
I've done the same thing right there. It's like, man, that was just so awesome. One of the girls playing rolled an ultimate fantastic success, and she's able to utilize different people, kind of like a roguish kind of thing. And she made these bone Wolverine claws, and it was an ultimate fantastic success with fast strike. So I was like, she ripped one guy's head off and then put her fist through the other one with the claws, and I was like, that's it, we're done, it's over, because
Yeah.
it was just so awesome. And but I like contingencies, like you said, you want to have them off to the side. I always factor in a few more villains or some options just in case I need more,
Right.
but I always don't have to. I can taper it back. Like if I was going to throw something else at them later and they're struggling, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it's
you got
good
to
to
plan for
plan
that
for
as a
that
narrator.
extra. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 100%. You got to plan for it and then make the decision of whether you want to use it or not. Because one of the worst things you can do is you can have this perfectly balanced battle and then be too strict because you had this other plan and then that other plan goes awry and now you're facing a total party kill
Yeah.
because this thing that you just had off to the side as a maybe you used rather than really understanding beforehand. Sometimes I'll even write out if within the first round 2 of these enemies drop, then I'll immediately bring in some backup. So I'll
Yeah.
actually think about beforehand, because in the moment I might not be doing the math in my head correctly. Maybe I'm using too much of my gut and not enough math. So I like to do all that thinking beforehand and have those contingencies in place.
Yeah.
That for me, that I think that can uh, help a boss battle go that way you want it to, rather than having an overcompensation.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. So also, the other thing is like some people want to know, like, again, how I kind of alluded to this earlier. How do you do stuff with, like, you only get one action or one standard action, one
Right.
reaction, and one movement. How do I simulate what you see in comic books all the time or the movies, right?
Mhm.
And this is what I was talking about with those characters. So like, I took Brendan O'Regan's Moloid here. He's got a rank 1. And I sent you something else. I kind of made him different. You can make them into groups of characters. And those 30 hit points are divided out amongst 10 Moloids, right? So again, that's 3 hit points each. So you can describe that, Captain America or whoever, Luke Cage is going through, and even though it's one roll, one attack action, you can describe it as the Moloids had jumped on him and he's throws one this way and slams one that way, and however much damage he deals takes out that many Moloids. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And a couple other scenes that I have in mind. Sorry, go ahead if you wanted to jump in there.
One thing that you said was, your enemy only gets 1 action.
Yeah.
So there are 2 things that I try to do with my big boss battles to help with that very correct, inescapable truth that you've got your 1 standard action, unless you have super speed powers, but you don't want to give all of your big bosses super speed. That gets very old. But if you only have 1 action, then don't take a bunch of powers that each one of them is a different kind of action. So for, versatility is great if you're playing a player character, because you're going to be in all of these different situations for, years of role playing the same character. You're going to be facing so many different types of situations. Having a wide variety of powers is great. But if you're playing a big boss, and you might only have 3 actions in your entire life, why would you take 7 melee powers when you're never going to use all of them? Sure, you have a couple that you got to take as prerequisites. So what I would do, even if I had a build, taking a build right out of the book, right out of the CRB, I would eliminate some of those attack powers that require actions and replace them either with, sometimes I would convert them into traits that would give me things like extra reactions, right? So getting an extra reaction can actually convert into an attack. We were talking earlier about Counter-Strike technique.
Yep.
Right. So if you start giving yourself more reactions, and then you start giving yourself more powers that can use those reactions, you do get more attacks in one round, if not more standard actions. And then if you have additional ones left over, we'll pour those into maybe an extra point in mighty or an extra point in accuracy, or give them that brawling that'll get their agility defense up a little bit higher, or the reverse if they have so there are things that you can do, like try and figure out how this battle is going to go and simplify the character. Because the other problem I have with complex higher rank builds is I'll get overwhelmed with the choices, right? Because everybody at the table, you got 5 players at the table, right?
Yep.
Every one of those people gets to take their turn. And then even if there's only one big bad, there are 5 other actions that get to happen. And they're thinking and planning about what their next action should be. And you don't have a minute. You don't have a second to think until it's your turn. And you go, what am I going to use?
Yeah.
So by minimizing the number of powers that you can use in that scenario, I think it just helps you in the moment make a better, or at least a more effective decision, rather than say, well, do I want to use fast attacks here, or do I want to use chain strikes, or, forget it. You don't have any of those. You've got one attack, make your one attack, but you're going to be doing a lot more damage with it because you upped your mighty by a point.
Yeah. I think that makes sense, because I think some people would struggle with like, but this is the build in the core rule book, and I want to use that, but it may not be beneficial, and it may not be how the big bad actually would play out in the comic books or whatever. So like even Dr. Octopus, I went back to him. With him, his tentacles to me made perfect sense for him to have lightning actions. Not that he's quick, but that his tentacles can attack extra time. So if he's the big bad, he is getting with my build that I did of him, it makes sense that he gets 2 standard actions and a reaction per turn because he's got 4 extra metal arms. So I tweaked him because in most cases he is the biggest of the, or at least the leader of the Sinister Six, or who in most cases he's the big bad, even if he's not the toughest one of them all, like Rhino or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I did tweak him to make him more of a one-on extra threat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, just as a reminder to the folks that are listening, right? This is the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game. There are infinite variations on every one of these characters. What's written in the core rule book is not the only flavor of that character that exists in the multiverse, and Matt Forbeck writes this multiple times. I think you could look at all of the profiles, all of the official profiles, I think are balanced in a way that they could be used as player characters.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you're building the same way, if you're building a henchman, knowing that they're not going to get a lot of actions, that they're there just as the speed bumps to get to the big bad. So why spend a lot of time in creating a full profile? Use the henchman profile, and it's going to be 1 1 1 1 1 0, right? 5 1s and a 0. That's their stats. If it's rank 2, it's 5 2s and a 0. So even if you didn't have a sheet in front of you, and I'm at, I don't use character sheet. I just have that in my mind. I know if they're rank 1, they've got 30 health, 30 focus, and their armor class is 11 for everything except for logic. And you just add 1 or add 30 for rank 2. So the game is adapting what the character sheet looks like for a minion. So are you out of line if you adapt what a big boss should look like? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the game is already telling you that it's okay to do that for certain types of threats. Even if you didn't want to give them extra actions, there are definitely a ton of ways you can adjust the stat block to make them a better threat for the party. Speaking of which, what do you typically do? Like, let's go back to like the basics a little bit. What rank, comparatively speaking, would your big bad be for a given party? +1, well, same rank?
Right now, my big bad, and again, these are all non-existent, non-standard characters. I throw in, Marvel appearances, but I think my big bad's at rank 5, and they're rank 3s. But his team that basically is their counterpart are all the same ranks as them. It's 3s versus 3s. But I think I got him 2 ranks up. Now they haven't encountered him yet, and they've only encountered the team actually not even in full force. So I got 5 parts of his team that's their counterpart, and they've only encountered, I want to say 3, maybe 4 of them yet. They haven't even encountered the 5th part of that villain team, and they haven't encountered the big bad. They've only heard about him, and they only know little snippets about him, and that's it. So, but right now it's I got him about 2 ranks up. Again, so I'm not quite sure how that'll play out yet.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, that can be challenging, or at the very least, that's the kind of battle where you're going to want to make sure you've got your karma saved up, because at that rank, the damage you could do on a fantastic success could wipe someone out in one shot. So having a karma point where you can go, oh my, you just rolled a fantastic success against me. All right, I'm going to use my karma, re-roll that Marvel die for me, and let's hope you roll lower. Like, those are the battles that you want to save up that karma for. So I think you need to plan for that. Yeah.
And that's why I haven't introduced him yet, because they're not quite, I'm trying to get him to like introduce him fully yet. I'm trying to get them to where they're used to using their powers and they got to use the karma. And they've had quite a few adventures now, making good, better decisions so that they don't. Some of them, one of them just likes to. I'm gonna go in and do this, and I'm like, it's not always the brightest thing.
Yeah.
Even though you got sturdy one, it's not as tough as you think right now. It is, but it
Yeah,
isn't.
sturdy one is nothing against the rank 5.
Yeah. So, we'll see how it plays out, but that's just kind of how I've got it for now. Now, if I was doing it with standard characters, I'd probably be probably the same, one or two ranks up above. But
Mhm.
again, I would see how it's playing out. And if he's just waylaying them, then, I might make some challenges for him, or I'd have a backup. Like one adventure I had Hawkeye waiting in the wings if I needed him. Like if
Right.
they were struggling, he was going to swoop in and like help do things. And I've also had some other NPC um, characters that don't exist that I made up on my own that are kind of part of their world, that show up if necessary.
Yeah, and you know what? Um you can have that NPC show up, but not even be a combatant. So I had
Yeah,
a scenario. So in the uh the adventure that I wrote at the end, I didn't think there was a strong chance of there being a TPK, but when you're playing with very new players, the adventure is designed for new players. So not envisioning a lot of advanced tactics being used. I wanted to put something in there that would at least make them feel okay. One thing you can consider is think of all of the battles they fought to get there, the people they saved, the allies they might have made along the way, and think of ways that could be some type of benefit if things really look like they're going the way of a TPK. So the example from my adventure is spoiler alerts if anyone's about to play that. Um, um, you fight the executioner at the end, and Friends of Humanity. He's got a couple of rank 2 or rank 3 henchmen at his side. Pro-human, anti-mutant enemies. If they are about to TPK your party of mutants, you can have from the prior, act 1, act 2 of the adventure, all the people that those mutants saved get involved, and they're humans. So they might form a human wall. They're unable to do any damage, right? So
yeah,
they're not going to win the battle for you. But what they can do is pose this conundrum for the guy who's got the Sentinel Tech blaster about ready to kill your party, and a bunch of humans form a wall in
doesn't
front of
kill
him.
them though. Yeah,
Right now he's like, and then maybe you hear the sirens in the background or something, and then it's like, all right, this guy clearly won. He clearly whooped your butts. You're coming away with a big fat L, but at least you're not all dead.
yeah,
And that can be if you do that like once, that could actually be a great motivator, a great learning experience in character and out of
yeah.
character. What did we do wrong? You can have a meta conversation like, yeah, that guy wasn't even really all that much, he wasn't much more powerful than you, but here
Here's
are
where
the
you went.
tactics that he used, right?
Yeah,
Remember how he used Skulk? Yeah. Are you going to be firing into, range weapons into combat anymore when you know that somebody that's evil can just use Skulk and throw innocent people or his own henchmen in the way? It's like that's a learning. So the next time you fight this guy, you're going to be thinking, how do I close the distance so that damn Skulk rule doesn't come into play
yeah.
anymore? So it's okay if you have a plan, because sometimes you paint yourself into a corner as a narrator and you'd be like, there is no realistic way that they could get out of this without it seeming like a real,
Like you just fudged it for them.
yeah, you're right, and really obvious fudge. But if you can tie the Deus Ex Machina to something from the plot, something they did earlier in the game, or a couple games ago, then it's like, all right, it can still be a satisfying loss for them. Thanks for the chat, Billy. As mentioned, here's our TLDR top 10 list. This is by no means exhaustive, so if you've got anything that's worked at your table, please let us know in the comments. To put the cherry on top of this Big Boss Sunday, I chatted with Tate RF and reread some of his adventures to review what he does for some of his boss battles. If you saw the last community spotlight I did, you know that Tate's put a ton of free adventures out there and other resources too. You can find them all right there at the link at the bottom of your screen. Tate brings a lot of creativity to the table, especially when it comes to hazards and traps. One of my favorite examples of him incorporating these into a battle is in his Savage Museum adventure, which includes the villain Calypso. She's got the home team advantage, and she set up some rune hazards to slow down and weaken the heroes. Each trap simulates a free attack by Calypso, as though she was using Elemental Blast, but there are rules to avoid these attacks as well. This is a really creative way of getting some extra attacks in, while adding a memorable new element to the combat. One of the examples Tate wanted to share was in the Mole Man Cometh. The Mole Man might not seem like a big boss type battle at first, but when you add in the Animen, Giganto, and then a dizzying array of traps, hazards, and other obstacles that prevent you from getting to the room where the Mole Man is controlling Giganto from, well, all of a sudden it doesn't quite matter what rank the Mole Man is. It is his allies and his environment that are the real threats in this encounter. So if you want to see all the details of this battle, please check out the link in the description and you can download it for free. Now you may have noticed a pattern here. Tate has a ton of really creative ideas, and he puts them all out for free. He's even shared a full system he's worked on called Strange Heroes, and it's the kind of system you can easily mine for MMRPG inspiration. He's running a Kickstarter right now to take those rules to a new level by adding an editor and an artist and by incorporating your feedback. I encourage you all to check it out. There's also some really fun ways you can have a more direct role in the creation of this system. Check out the link in the description and give Strange Heroes a look. Well, everybody, that was a long one. If you're still with me, you're the real Strange Hero here. Thanks so much for listening, and another big thank you to Billy Mickel, who is just such a joy to speak with. Really happy I got to spend the time with him talking about this. I hope you all have a great day.